Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video we're going to do a coolant change for my 2018 Triumph Bobber Black. First things first, get the bike up on my paddock stand so it's nice and stable and easy to work on. If you've never used a paddock stand before, I've got a couple of videos in my channel that you can look at, and it'll give you some idea how to use a front and back paddock stand. For the new people on the channel, I'm not a professional mechanic, so all this is basically just from trial and error. Okay, let's get started. First thing is first, we want to remove the cover for the reservoir. You're going to need an 8mm socket, and you're going to remove 4 screws from the cover. You'll notice that every time we need to use a socket or something like that, I've also included in the small caption at the bottom of the screen what the torque settings are for when you put things back together again. Okay, so once you remove the cover, it's going to reveal the coolant reservoir and also the rear brake reservoir. So the coolant reservoir is a larger reservoir at the bottom. When you do a coolant change, you're going to have to independently empty out both reservoirs, both tanks. So you have the main radiator tank, and then you have the backup reservoir tank, which is this one. So in this video, I'm actually going to use the front paddock stand. You don't have to. You can actually access the radiator hose without the front paddock stand, but I like using it because it just gives me a couple more inches of height, and I don't have to struggle so much in terms of trying to get to the hose, but you can do it without it. So what I'm trying to remove over here is the skid plate, and I've got a aftermarket skid plate which is a little bit higher. The original skid plate on the Triumph Bobber is actually quite small and you don't have to remove it, but in my case the aftermarket skid plate is taller and it actually wraps around the radiator hose. The next step is to unscrew the rear brackets for the fuel tank. You don't actually have to disconnect the fuel tank hoses, so you can just unscrew these 2 bolts. I think you're using a 10mm socket, and you've got to tighten it back up to 30 Newton meters when you put it back on. So all I'm doing over here is just taking out the bolts, and I'm lifting up the tank and I'm pulling it back a little bit so it reveals the filler cap for the radiator. So Triumph put it underneath the tank, and you'll see in the video shortly that it'll expose, once I slide the tank back, it'll expose the filler cap. You're going to have to remove the radiator filler cap, and to do it you twist it anti-clockwise, and there's 2 clicks to fully release. Grab a container to catch the radiator coolant, and it doesn't have to be too big. I think the Triumph Bobber only uses 1.5 liters worth of coolant, so just a small tray will be good enough. And then you can start working on the clamps on the radiator hose. To do this, all you need to do is grab a pair of pliers, and you need to pinch the clamps down and then slowly wiggle it loose and move it off to the side. The fit for the hose is quite tight, so I use a screwdriver just to pry it loose a little bit. Be careful not to puncture the hose, but once you got it off, the fluid will just pour right out of the radiator. I honestly don't know why my radiator coolant is almost clear, but it does smell like a chemical coolant. So I'm pretty sure it's a coolant, but I don't know why it's clear. I thought most of them were like slightly green or red or orange or something like that. So if anybody knows the reason why, I did Google it, and I think it's because it's old. Leave me a comment if you know the reason why it's clear. The next step is to remove the coolant from the reservoir. So I've got this little contraption over here. I just got a hose and a large syringe which I bought in the pharmacy, and I put them together and I just stick it into the reservoir and I suck it out and empty it into my container. You can actually unscrew the reservoir. There are 3 bolts holding it in there on the bracket. You could probably just unscrew the 3 bolts, and remove the radiator, reservoir, and just tip it upside down and you'll get it all out. But this method was easy enough, so I just decided to do it this way. It's up to you. Now, I didn't video this part over here where I actually flushed out both the radiator and the reservoir. So I probably used about 5 liters of clean water, and I just poured it into the radiator filler cup, the cap, and then just let the water run through the radiator and pour out to the bottom. So you just keep doing this until it's all clear, until the water is all clear. Just double check there's no rust or anything in your coolant. For me, it was all good, so I flushed out my reservoir and I also flushed out my radiator. So once you've drained out all your old coolant, it's time to, and you flushed out your tanks, it's time to put everything back together before you start filling it up. So yeah, everything is in the reverse. So once you've got everything back together again, it's time to fill in your coolant. And Triumph recommends that you get an OAT 2053 coolant, and I couldn't find that where I live, and so this is the closest I could get. It's a Motul Auto Cool Optimal, so it meets every single spec that the Triumph manual recommends. I filled in the reservoir, the back reservoir first, and it did tell you to sort of fill up. The manual says fill it up to the highest point, but I'm just going to fill it up to the lowest point because my bike is on a paddock stand, so the rear end is tilted a little bit higher. So it's going to look, so once I get the bike back on the ground, it's going to level up to the highest point. It's time to fill up the main tank. So this one's a little bit tricky. So you want to pour in the coolant very slowly because according to the other YouTube videos I watched and stuff like that, you don't want to create any sort of like air bubbles or air pockets when you pour it in too quickly. So pour it in slowly, and hopefully there won't be any air pockets in there, because that's going to affect your the temperature in your radiator. And of course, after filling it up, shake the bike around a little bit and make sure that there's no pockets of air trapped in your radiator. You can see from the filler cap over here, the liquid's all the way to the top already, and I've shook the bike, and the liquid doesn't seem to want to go down. So this is the next step. You got to put back your filler cap, and then push your tank up forward again, lock it down temporarily, and you're going to start up the bike. And you're going to let that coolant circulate in the engine. I ran the bike for about 5 minutes.
Five minutes later.
Turn the bike off. Remove the tank and give it about 5 to 10 minutes for the coolant to cool down a little bit, and then open up the filler cap again.
A few minutes later.
Just be really careful. Make sure that there's no pressure behind the cap, and as you can see from the filler cap, the coolant has already gone through the engine, and there's space to fill up the tank with more coolant. Probably try not to get so messy like what I've done. Ugh. And that is how you replace the coolant on your Triumph bobber. So the only thing left is to put the filler cap on properly, clean up the mess that you made, put the tank back on, lock it down 30 Newton meters for the tank bracket, put the cover back for the reservoir, and take your bike out for a ride. The other thing is just to make sure that the cooling fan, the radiator fan, comes on at the right interval things to look out for. If it's always on, that means there's probably some airlock inside there. So after you're taking it for a ride, you might want to do a third check to make sure that the coolant is enough. But I literally filled in about 1.5 liters worth of coolant, so I think it's about right. So I hope that helped. If you really enjoyed the content I made, please like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos to come.